In the small town of Cedarville, there was an old hotel that had been standing for over a century. It was once a popular spot for travelers passing through, but as the years went on, it fell into disrepair and became abandoned. Many locals believed that the hotel was cursed and haunted by the spirits of those who had died there. One night, a group of friends decided to explore the old hotel for thrills. They sneaked into the building through a broken window and made their way up to the second floor. As they were walking down the hallway, they began to feel a chill in the air, and the hairs on the back of their necks stood up. It was as if someone was watching them. Suddenly, they heard a sound of footsteps coming towards them. They turned around, but no one was there. Then, they heard a faint whisper in their ear. It sounded like a woman's voice, but they couldn't make out what she was saying. The friends started to feel uneasy, and they decided to leave the hotel. But as they turned around, they saw a figure in the distance. It was a woman in a white dress, standing at the end of the hallway. She appeared to be floating in midair, and her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The friends were frozen in fear, unable to move as the woman started to glide towards them. As she got closer, they realized that she was not alone. Dozens of other ghostly figures appeared around her, all staring at the friends with an unquenchable hunger in their eyes. The friends tried to run, but they couldn't escape. The ghosts surrounded them, pulling them closer and closer towards the woman in the white dress. As they were enveloped in the ghostly embrace, they felt their very souls being drained away, until they were nothing but empty shells. The next morning, the police were called to the hotel by a concerned neighbor who had heard screams in the night. When they arrived, they found the bodies of the friends, all drained of their life force, their faces twisted in terror. From that day on, no one dared to enter the haunted hotel again. It remained abandoned, a testament to the horrors that lay within its walls. In the small town of Millwood, there was an old abandoned asylum on the outskirts of town. Rumors had always circulated about the dark and twisted experiments that took place there, but nobody had been inside for years. One day, a group of teenagers decided to sneak into the asylum for some thrills. As they explored the decrepit halls, they noticed strange symbols etched into the walls and floors. Suddenly, they heard a low growling noise coming from down the hallway. One by one, the teenagers started disappearing, until only one was left. She frantically searched for her friends, but all she found were bloody handprints and scratch marks. As she tried to escape, she realized that the doors were all locked, trapping her inside with the unknown terror. Suddenly, she heard a voice whispering her name. She turned around to see a ghostly figure with glowing eyes staring back at her. Frozen with fear, she watched as the figure slowly approached, reaching out with a hand covered in blood. The girl screamed and ran as fast as she could, trying to find an exit. But no matter where she turned, she found herself back in the same hallway. Eventually, she collapsed to the ground, exhausted and terrified. As she lay there, she heard the ghostly figure whisper in her ear, "You'll never leave this place." Once a year, a group of childhood friends made a tradition of going camping in the dense woods outside of their hometown. They looked forward to the escape from their daily lives, the crisp air, and the opportunity to reconnect with one another. This year, however, something was different. As they set up camp in a clearing, they noticed an eerie stillness in the air, and the woods seemed to be devoid of any animal sounds. None of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. That night, they gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories of their lives since they had last seen each other. But as the night grew darker, the unsettling feeling in the air intensified. They heard strange rustling noises in the bushes, and the fire seemed to flicker and dim inexplicably. Suddenly, one of the friends, Alex, let out a scream. They turned to see him being dragged into the darkness by an unseen force. They rushed to his aid, but he was gone without a trace. Panic set in among the remaining friends, and they quickly gathered their things and made a run for it. But as they stumbled through the woods, they realized that they were being pursued by something inhuman, something that seemed to be toying with them. One by one, the friends were taken, dragged into the darkness by an unseen force. Their screams echoed through the woods, but no one was there to help them. In the end, only one of them survived, barely escaping with their life. Years later, the survivors still cannot forget the terrifying ordeal in the woods. They still hear the whispers of the darkness and the rustling of the leaves, and they know that something evil is still out there, waiting for its next victim. Carla and Jake had just moved into their dream house. It was a beautiful old Victorian-style home with plenty of charm and character. The house had been on the market for a while, but the couple couldn't believe their luck when they were able to buy it for a steal. However, they soon discovered the reason why the house was so cheap. From the moment they moved in, strange things began to happen. Doors would open and close by themselves, objects would move on their own, and they would hear strange noises in the middle of the night. At first, they brushed it off as just their imaginations, but the occurrences became more frequent and more frightening. One night, Carla woke up to find a woman standing at the foot of their bed. She was dressed in a flowing white dress and had long, black hair. The woman didn't say anything, but her eyes were filled with anger and malice. Carla screamed and woke Jake up, but when he turned on the light, the woman was gone. The couple began to do some research on the history of the house and discovered that it had once been owned by a woman named Elizabeth. She had lived there in the early 1900s and had been brutally murdered by her husband. Her ghost was said to haunt the house, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to disturb her peace. As the days went on, the couple became more and more frightened. They tried to ignore the strange occurrences, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They even tried to sell the house, but no one was interested in buying it. One night, as they were sleeping, they heard a loud crash coming from the living room. When they went to investigate, they found that a portrait of Elizabeth had fallen off the wall and shattered into a million pieces. Suddenly, they heard a loud, menacing laugh coming from the darkness. Carla and Jake knew that they had to do something to put Elizabeth's spirit to rest. They contacted a local paranormal investigator, who told them that they needed to perform a ritual to cleanse the house of the evil presence. They followed the instructions and lit candles, burned sage, and recited incantations. When they finished, they felt a sense of relief wash over them. The house was quiet, and they knew that Elizabeth's spirit had finally been put to rest. They decided to stay in the house and make it their home, but they never forgot the terror they had experienced. They knew that they would always be haunted by the memory of Elizabeth's vengeful spirit. It seemed like a fun idea at first. 6 strangers had signed up to participate in an escape room game that promised to be challenging, but not dangerous. The game was set up in an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town. It was a perfect location for a spooky game, with creaky floorboards and dimly lit rooms. As they entered the game, the strangers split up to search for clues. The first room was fairly easy to solve, but as they moved on to the second room, things started to get strange. The door slammed shut behind them, and they realized they were locked in. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The game was supposed to last an hour, but they had no idea how to escape. As they frantically searched for a way out, they started to notice that the clues were not just puzzles, but also warnings. One clue read, there were a room with no exit, but they had already entered a room that seemed to have no way out. Another clue read, time is running out, and they noticed that the clock on the wall was ticking down faster than it should be. As the group moved from room to room, they began to realize that the game was not just a game. The clues seemed to be leading them down a dark and dangerous path, and they started to hear strange noises coming from the walls. In the final room, they found a message scrawled on the wall in blood: "You have been chosen." Suddenly, the lights went out, and they were plunged into complete darkness. That's when they heard it, a low growling sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It grew louder and more ferocious, and they realized that something was in the room with them. As their eyes adjusted to the darkness, they saw a pair of glowing eyes staring at them from the shadows. They tried to run, but the door was locked tight. They were trapped with the thing in the darkness. The next morning, the game operators found the escape room with no sign of the 6 participants. The police searched the building, but found no trace of them. It was as if they had disappeared without a trace. The escape room game was shut down, but rumors persisted that something malevolent still lurked in the old building. Those who entered never returned, and it was said that the spirit of the game's creator was still seeking new players to join his twisted game. Detective Mark had seen his fair share of strange cases, but the string of unexplained disappearances in the small town of Millfield had him baffled. Over the past few months, several people had gone on missing without a trace, and despite his best efforts, he had no leads. The townspeople seemed on edge, and Mark sensed that there was more to this case than meets the eye. He decided to dig deeper and began his investigation by visiting the homes of the missing persons. As he questioned family members and friends, he noticed a common thread: they all seemed to be hiding something. He couldn't quite put his finger on it, but he knew that there was a dark secret that the town was trying to keep hidden. One night, while patrolling the deserted streets, Mark heard a strange noise coming from the old abandoned mill at the edge of town. Curiosity getting the best of him, he decided to investigate. As he approached the mill, he noticed a faint light coming from inside. Drawing his gun, he entered the building and found himself in a large room filled with dozens of people, all of whom had gone on missing in the past few months. At the center of the room was a group of townspeople, dressed in black robes and performing a sinister ritual. Mark realized with horror that they were sacrificing the missing persons to some sort of dark entity. He tried to intervene, but the townspeople overpowered him, revealing that they were all part of a secret cult that had been controlling the town for generations. They had sacrificed countless innocent lives to appease the dark entity, ensuring the town's prosperity and success. Mark was their latest sacrifice, and he knew that he wouldn't make it out alive. As they prepared to perform the ritual, he silently cursed the town and its people, knowing that their dark secret would forever haunt him. The next day, the town was eerily quiet, and there was no sign of Detective Mark. The case of the missing persons was closed, and the town continued to thrive, its prosperity forever tied to the blood sacrifice of innocent lives. Alice had always loved antiques, so when she stumbled upon a small antique store while exploring the city, she couldn't resist going inside. The shop was dimly lit, with an eclectic mix of items displayed on shelves and tables. As she wandered through the aisles, she came across an ornate antique mirror that caught her eye. The mirror had an intricate gold frame with a faded, smoky glass surface that seemed to hold a mystical quality. The shopkeeper noticed Alice admiring the mirror and approached her. "That's a very special mirror, miss," he said. "It has a long and mysterious history, and many people believe it to be cursed." Alice was intrigued. She had never heard of a cursed mirror before. "What kind of history?" she asked. "It's said to have belonged to a powerful witch who used it to cast spells and curses on her enemies," the shopkeeper explained. "She was eventually caught and burned at the stake, but the mirror survived. Legend has it that whoever possesses the mirror will experience strange and terrifying occurrences." Alice was skeptical but fascinated by the mirror's story. She decided to buy it and take it home with her. At first, Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But as the days passed, Alice began to notice strange things happening around her. The room where she hung the mirror always seemed colder than the rest of the house, even on warm days. And sometimes, when she looked into the mirror, she could swear she saw a figure standing behind her, even though no one was there when she turned around. One night, Alice woke up to a loud crash. She ran to the living room and found the mirror had fallen off the wall and shattered on the floor. But when she looked at the broken pieces, she realized something even more disturbing. The reflection in the mirror was not her own, it was the face of the witch from the mirror's legend. Alice knew then that the mirror was truly cursed, and that she had to get rid of it before it was too late. She gathered the broken pieces and took them back to the antique shop, where the shopkeeper accepted them without a word. But even after the mirror was gone, Alice could still feel its presence in her house. She never felt truly safe in that room again, always wondering if the mirror's curse still lingered. And sometimes, late at night, she could swear she heard the cackling laughter of the witch echoing through the empty room. Detective Jameson had seen his fair share of gruesome crime scenes during his career, but nothing could have prepared him for the case that landed on his desk one day. A young woman had been found murdered in her home, her body mutilated in a way that suggested the killer had been playing a sick game with her. As Jameson began his investigation, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to this case than just a random act of violence. The evidence pointed towards a ritualistic killing, but he had no idea what kind of cult or group would be behind something so gruesome. As the days passed, Jameson became more and more obsessed with the case. He worked around the clock, following every lead and interviewing anyone who might have information. But every time he thought he was getting close to a breakthrough, something would happen to set him back. One night, while he was working late in his office, Jameson heard a knock at the door. He opened it to find a woman standing there, her face obscured by a hood. "Detective Jameson," she said in a low, gravelly voice. "You're getting too close to the truth. You need to back off before it's too late." Before Jameson could respond, the woman disappeared into the darkness. He was left standing there, heart pounding, wondering who or what he was up against. The next day, Jameson received a package in the mail. Inside was a severed finger, the skin stripped off and the bone carved with strange symbols. A note was attached, warning Jameson to stop his investigation. But Jameson wasn't the kind of detective who gave up easily. He continued to dig deeper, determined to solve the case no matter what. As he got closer to the truth, the threats became more frequent and more violent. Jameson began to fear for his own safety, but he refused to give up. Finally, after months of investigation, he uncovered a dark cult that was responsible for the murder and other atrocities. With the help of his fellow detectives, Jameson was able to bring the cult to justice. But the experience had left him shaken, and he knew that he would never be able to forget the horrors he had uncovered. Once a kind and gentle person, Sarah's life took a dark turn after being bitten by a strange spider. At first, the bite seemed innocuous, but soon she began to feel strange. Her personality shifted, becoming darker and more aggressive. Her friends and family noticed the change, and they grew increasingly concerned. She became short-tempered and easily agitated, snapping at those around her and even engaging in physical altercations. But the scariest part was the look in her eyes. They had changed, becoming colder and more distant, like there was something malevolent lurking behind them. As the days went on, her behavior grew even more erratic. She began to have vivid nightmares and even hallucinations. She saw visions of spiders crawling all over her body, and heard strange whispers in her ear that she couldn't understand. Despite her protests, her family finally convinced her to seek medical attention. After undergoing several tests, Doctors found that her blood contained a toxic substance that they couldn't identify. They speculated that it could be related to the spider bite, but they couldn't be sure. Sarah's condition continued to worsen. She began to experience physical changes as well, developing unusual bumps and growths on her skin. Her hair fell out in clumps, and her eyes became bloodshot and sunken. Her family was afraid of her, and they began to avoid her as much as possible. One night, while alone in her room, Sarah experienced a seizure. Her body convulsed violently, and she screamed in agony. Her family rushed in, but there was nothing they could do. Sarah died that night, her body twisted and distorted, a shell of the person she used to be. The cause of her death was never fully understood, but rumors spread about the spider bite and the mysterious poison that had taken over her body. Some say that she was possessed by an evil spirit, while others believe that the spider itself was cursed. But one thing was certain: Sarah's story served as a warning to others, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the unknown and the consequences of delving too deep into mysteries beyond our understanding. Once upon a time, a young couple named Emily and Jake bought their first home together. The house was beautiful and seemed perfect for them, but they soon discovered that it was not the peaceful haven they had hoped for. As they settled in, strange things began to happen. Doors would open and close on their own. Footsteps could be heard coming from empty rooms, and objects would move by themselves. At first, they dismissed it as their imagination, but as the occurrences grew more frequent and intense, they couldn't deny that something was wrong. One night, Emily woke up to find a figure standing at the end of their bed. It was a woman, dressed in old-fashioned clothing, with long dark hair and a face twisted in anger. Emily screamed, waking Jake, but when they turned on the lights, the woman was gone. The couple soon learned that the woman was the former owner of the house, who had died years before. Her spirit was angry and vengeful, and she wanted them out of her home. The hauntings grew worse, with objects flying across the room, eerie whispers in the night, and even physical attacks on the couple. They tried to leave, but found themselves unable to escape the house's grip. One night, the couple decided to investigate the basement, which they had previously avoided. They found a hidden room, filled with old items belonging to the previous owner, including a diary detailing her pain and suffering while living in the house. The spirit appeared, angry and enraged, and began to attack them. Emily and Jake were able to escape the house, but they knew that the spirit of the former owner would continue to haunt and terrorize anyone who dared to enter the home. They left, vowing to never return, and to warn others about the haunted house. Years later, the house still stands, abandoned and derelict. But people say that on quiet nights, you can hear the sound of a woman weeping, and the creaking of old floorboards as the vengeful spirit of the former owner continues to haunt the home.